right away he was like, no, like you could tell he's definitely like, who's this? Who's this random lady calling me saying I want to arrange some flowers? Can you send me some? But he was really gracious in his no. And he really took the time to explain to me not just why he was saying no, but kind of explaining to me kind of what was going on in the floral industry at that time. And he and I ended up on the phone for about 2.5 hours.
Imagine that DIY flower arranging was one of your main sources of self-care and you had that taken away. That was the case for today's guest, Talia Boone, who had a ritual of going to the Los Angeles flower markets to find bulk flowers that she could bring back home for her flower arranging. Now, during the lockdowns, she no longer had access to farmers market, and when she tried to go online to order those same kinds of flowers, they weren't available to her. They were only available to wholesalers in large quantities, which is why she set out to fix that problem for people who enjoyed DIY flower arranging like she did. Opportunity and timing met with Talia's ingenuity and creativity, and Postal Petals was born. During this episode, Talia is going to walk us through the journey of building the company, how she's been able to get so much visibility onto her company, how she's been able to build the relationships with her farmers, logistics, and so much more. So if you're interested in learning how she's been able to build Postal Petals, keep on watching. Before we dive in though, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. With that, let's dive right in. Talia Boone, welcome to She's Off Script. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk with you today.
So for anyone who hasn't come across you before, could you share who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I am Talia Boone. I am the founder and CEO of Postal Petals. And Postal Petals is an immersive floral and self-care company that uses fresh cut flowers and DIY flower arranging as a tool for mindfulness and self-care. We work with both consumers and B2B clients. On our consumer side, what that looks like is we partner with domestic flower farms to ship bundles of fresh cut flowers to our customers nationwide. And then on the business to business side for our corporate clients, we utilize that same structure to also host either virtual or in-person floral design workshops as part of their employee team building activities or corporate health and wellness activities. We also do immersive floral art installations as well as corporate gifting.
Wow. Okay. And I would really like to dive into just the different streams of revenue you've set up there. But I understand you're a publicist and a brand strategist by trade, and you still run an agency today. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So my world of flowers is not even 3 years old. It's insane. I always tell people, if you'd have told me 3 years ago today that I'd have a flower company, I would have been like, you are bugging. In fact, I'm not even worried about that. Like, get out of here with that. But my background, I'm actually a trained publicist. I went to school for communications with an emphasis in PR. My background is in sports. I worked in the NFL for a couple of teams, then leagues and players and associations and those things. And I've also owned, a few different companies. So the generalist of my background is that I am it's marketing, PR, branding, brand strategy, and brand partnerships, both in the entertainment and sports space. And most recently, I have an agency called Intersect. We've been in operation for about 6 years. And what we do is we are a tactical solutions agency that operates right at the intersection of sports and entertainment, corporate and consumer brands, and social impact.
Wow. So given all of that, how did you find yourself now owning a flower company?
Yeah, so my pathway to flowers actually had a lot to do with Intersect, right?
Mm,
Because I always say to people that when you really care about impact work, you take it personally, right? And you really feel deeply about the issues that you're working hard to bring change to. And several years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to flower arranging, just as like a fun friend activity, something I hadn't done before, and I did it. And it was not just fun, but I found it to be really relaxing. And because of the work that I was doing with Intersect, it's the impact work is really interesting, right? Because you go into it thinking, oh, all of these things are broken, all these systems are broken, things aren't, there's no way that we have to be able to fix this because, the school system, there's this school to prison pipeline, and look at the numbers for incarcerated persons and all of these things. And once you kind of start getting into the work, you realize that actually the system is not broken, that it is really functioning exactly in the way that it's intended to function, all the way down to, civil rights and, civic engagement and voter rights, suppression, all of those things. It's very well crafted in those ways. And so in doing that work, it can be very depressing when you hear things like, when you start to get into that work and you start to realize that that you're not giving them new ideas. They know what's happening and they're just not trying to change. It can be very depressing, very demoralizing, very frustrating. And so I would always just take that energy. I found myself taking that energy into flowers and using the process of flower arranging to kind of decompress and relieve anxiety. So kind of without me even realizing it, or to be completely honest, without me really having the language to describe it, I was really using flowers as my form of self-care. Whenever I would be really stressed out, or whenever, something would happen that I would just be like, this is so wrong. These people aren't even trying to fix this. I would just be like, let me go on down to the flower market, grab me some flowers, come on back, pour a glass of wine, put on some, soft music. And that would always, always really just help to decompress me. And so, like I said, it just became my form of self-care. And then fast forward to the pandemic, here in LA, we went on lockdown the second week of March. And, it's initially just meant to be 2 weeks. And then it went to 3 weeks, to 4 weeks, to 5 weeks.
We all know that story.
Yeah. And by 6 weeks, I was like, yo, something ain't clean in the water. Like, this is wild. Like, it started to become very clear that they had no idea what was going on, that there was no real certainty about what was going to happen. And that for me, it started, the anxiety started kind of coming up, the stress, just thinking, what does this mean for, for my career, for my family, for my life, like all of these things. It was very scary, that type of uncertainty, things that no one had dealt with before. And, the walls just kind of started closing in on me because I was very strictly quarantined. I'm one of those people, when it comes to like health stuff, I follow rules really well. And so it was my therapist who actually said, as she's kind of hearing me, not necessarily spiral, but she's hearing the signs of me preparing to spiral, And so she was like, I haven't heard you talk about arranging flowers in a while. Why don't you try that? And let's see if that, if that works for you. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. Yeah. The only problem was that where I would typically go for flowers was the LA flower market. I would just go down there. I don't know the names of flowers, but I would just see beautiful flowers, beautiful colors, just kneel around the market and kind of pick up whatever I wanted and come home and arrange them. But the market was closed due to the pandemic lockdowns. And so I thought, oh, well, you can get anything delivered right now, even stuff that you couldn't normally get delivered. I'll look around online and have them ship me a box to my house. So I start looking and searching for a company that could ship me fresh cut flowers, to the house that I could arrange. And I really didn't find anything. I saw there were all kinds of flower companies that, yes, will ship you flowers, but they're arrangements, already done arrangements. And that's not what I wanted. It wasn't the flowers that really brought me peace. It was really the process of arranging them that I was looking for. I needed that experience of actually working with them, building the arrangement, stem by stem, because that's where the decompression comes, at least for me. And so I couldn't really find that in the marketplaces I was searching online. But during that search, I stumbled upon this wholesale flower distributor who shipped really large volumes of flowers to his retail clients all around the world. And so I thought, well, I know he has access to flowers. I'm just going to call him and just see if I could convince him to reduce his minimums to just small enough for me to have essentially a consumer size box shipped to my house so I could arrange.
What were his minimums? I'm just curious.
Well, he's shipping very large volumes of flowers. So you're talking about huge boxes of flowers. So you're talking, like multiples of, 10, like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 bundles of flowers, like massive, like bundles of flowers. Because you're thinking he's shipping to retail clients. So you're thinking event planners, wedding planners, florists, not necessarily grocery stores, but really large, like you're just having to ship like super huge boxes. multiples to get, to kind of stand up entire events and that kind of thing. And so I called him, like I said, to just kind of, say, hey, would you mind just sending me some flowers? And right away he was like, no, like you could tell he's definitely like, who's this? Who's this random lady calling me saying, I want to arrange some flowers. Can you send me some? But he was really gracious in his no. And he really took the time to explain to me not just why he was saying no, but kind of explaining to me kind of what was going on in the floral industry at that time. And he and I ended up on the phone for about 2.5 hours. And by the end of that conversation, now remember, I have a background in brand strategy, brand partnership. So I'm very familiar with the concept of brand building, filling holes in the market, seeing opportunities, all of these things. And throughout that conversation, there were just all these like bells were going off because I'm recognizing all of these really opportunities. And so by the end of that call, two things that I recognized. One was that what I was looking for did not exist in the marketplace in the way that I was looking for it. And then two, I recognized that because of the pandemic, there was an opportunity for me to enter the floral industry, which for all intents and purposes really had a bit of a gatekeeper type culture, right? Where larger retailers could, in a lot of ways, kind of dictate who farms could work, would work with, not officially, but they can see, if they felt like you were going to threaten their business and they're a big client of a farm, they could very easily be like, well, we're sending you a lot of business. This could be a threat to what we're doing. We would really prefer you not, to work with them or whatever. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that would happen in that industry. But because of the pandemic, it really was kind of like the great equalizer, right? Where many of the things that larger retailers were able to, work with farms for, things like events and weddings and those kind of things, were all canceled. That's because true. Of lockdowns, right? And at that time, people were hoarding toilet paper. They were not buying grocery store flowers. They were not, that was not the vibe they were going for. And so many of these farms were really actively looking for new ways to bring their product to market because their flowers are overgrown. They're dying in the field. They're having to lay off workers. So they're all in this space. And these are things that I did not realize until, this conversation. And, the good thing is that I'm a curious person. So even though floral industry is not my industry at all, I care about people, right? Remember, I have this tactical solutions agency that's all focused on people and really looking at their circumstance and natively identifying from a deep kind of rooted place, how do you start to solve some of the things that are impacting negatively their lives, their communities, their families, their existence. And so I always listen to people with that purpose in mind. And so by the end of the conversation, I said to him, like, hey, do you think something like this could work? And I described to him essentially what is Postal Petals. Like if we partnered with these farms and we shipped, small boxes of flowers to different consumers, do you think something like this could work? And he sat for a minute and thought about it. And he said, if you'd have asked me that 4 months ago, I would have said, absolutely not. There's no way that would work. But now, given everything that's happening, something like that may actually work. And so that was the first week of May in 2020, the week before Mother's Day. And I immediately went to work building out a wireframe. What could the company look like? What would I, want the company name to be? Buying up, all the domains. And because I'm again branding, so I know got to have this. It's got to be consistent across all platforms. So even if I got a really great name that's available on 2 of the 5 major platforms, if it's not available on all 5, we can't use it because got to be able to say Postal Petals across platforms. You know what I mean? Right. You can't be like it. We're this on this platform, that on that. Like that's a mouthful. Nope. And you don't always have time for that. So I immediately went to work, got to the business of building that business. And by the end of July of that same year, we launched what is an early version of Postal Petals in beta with nearly 20 farm partners signed up to ship for us. And so
wait a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
You went from having kind of a very well gate-kept industry where you would never have been able to access relationships to these farmers to then signing 20 of them onto your beta. What was that conversation like? How did you find these farmers, and what was that conversation like with them to get them on board?
Well, that is an excellent question. I'll tell you that the way that I was able to do that is because I believe strongly in the power of partnership and collaboration. And so what I did was I enlisted the services of that same guy that I talked to that first day when I got the idea, because this man works. He's got like 30 plus years in the global floral industry. And so I said to him, knowing that his business is, shipping flowers or, coordinating flowers being shipped all around the world, I said to him, like, hey, can we work something out where you can kind of help to introduce us to these different farms, help to set up this network, this supply chain with the
I'm sorry,
farm
and you said you just
partners.
Googled and found this guy?
One thing I
Man, look
learned
at
is
this timing.
historical. Yeah, very much so. One thing that it's funny. I am one of those people when I want something, my general philosophy is if I can think of it, it should exist. Even if
I
it
love that.
doesn't, it could exist and it should exist because if I'm thinking of it, someone else is thinking of it too. And even if it doesn't exist, similar to Postal Petals in the way that I was looking for it, the fact that I'm thinking about it in this way lets me know that there's at least some infrastructure, some ability to form this in a way that works for me. And that's ultimately what I did with Postal Petals. And so it was this gentleman who actually helped to facilitate a lot of those early farm
Got it.
relationships with us to really, and it was great to have had him because his reputation precedes him, right? Because of his long time in the industry, farms were willing to take a risk and try it because they had longstanding relationships with him. So almost the same thing that would have kept me out of the industry before, I had this, kind of like, secret key that was willing to take me in and say, okay, this is something that I want to try. Would you guys be willing to, to kind of, support this type of model? And because again, they were all, missing their primary revenue streams, they were all very willing,
To try something a
very
little
willing
bit
to try.
different.
Yeah, and our biggest issue, to be honest, with the farms in the early days is that we couldn't ship from all of them all the time because there were so many farms. There were only so many boxes. We're new, so we're not shipping
Yeah.
thousands of boxes a day. So there's only so many that we could use at a time. That really was our biggest issue with the farms early on, is we almost had too large of a supply chain, too many options. Yeah,
Ooh.
which is an excellent problem to
I
have.
definitely want to talk about the logistics, but before that, I feel like when you initially go out to start a business, you envision the business rolling out in a specific way, right? Um,
Mhm.
but oftentimes, in reality, in practicality, it doesn't often play out that way. So I wonder if there were any instances like that for you where you had to pivot the business model a little bit on the fly when you
Oh,
initially
yes. I'd
started.
be a fool if I didn't pivot. Listen,
Yeah.
that's what beta's for, right?
Mm,
Like, how they talk about how if you are, and I forget who it was that said this, but I'm sure you've heard this a million times. If your first product comes out and it looks perfect, you've waited too long to go to market. So
yeah.
I knew early on that I'm not waiting. I need to get, for me, a minimum viable product out. And I need to test this because we're also, be clear, we're building this during the pandemic. I could not go to any of these farms. I could not try all of these products. Really just need to see, could the farms deliver what I was looking to build? So yeah, it was a very clunky offering when it first came out. Within the first beta, within the first couple of days of beta, initially we were shipping the boxes for free. After the first few orders came in, I was like, oh, it's not free anymore. I immediately messaged the developer and was like, yeah, so we need to add on shipping. This is
Yeah.
we're flat rate shipping. This is what it looks like. Cause I looked at other flower companies and kind of saw what the industry norm was for shipping,
Mm,
also understanding that there would be a loss on shipping, but I wasn't willing to take as much of a loss on shipping as it would have been if I was shipping these boxes for free, because shipping flower boxes, because these are large, 3-foot boxes. They're very large boxes because we're sending long stem, very
mm.
fresh cut flowers. And so that was one of the first things that we changed, was that we couldn't, because I knew we would crash and burn right away. without having without charging at least something for shipping to subsidize. The other thing that we realized right away, so initially we selected for everybody what flowers they wanted. Well, as the orders started coming in, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't, that's a pressure to try to figure. It's like ordering at a restaurant for somebody. I
Yeah.
don't know what they like. I don't know what kind of, what their style is, what their aesthetic is. We just need to create recipes that they can choose from, and then we'll just feel those recipes as they come in. So there was those types of tweaks
Hmm.
that
And I
we
do understand the urge to do that because today there are some subscription boxes that kind of surprise you. You kind of get whatever is there that month.
yeah,
And sometimes we do just go with whatever model exists, but when you actually put it on the ground, it doesn't work and you have to pivot.
it doesn't work the same way. And I will say we have almost like a hybrid of that, right? So what we do is we will offer, six curated recipes from each farm, based on six curated recipes total each month, based on what's in season, in bloom, which looking good and what kind of fits within our model. And
Mm.
then, so they could either pick one of the six recipes that we have available. And when I say recipes, I mean flower recipes, meaning, one bundle of, sunflowers, one bundle of eucalyptus, one bundle of roses, all kind of wrapped together to be, a recipe called, cuffing season or pretty in pink or whatever. So they have those six recipes to choose from, but then they also have the option for a surprise me. And they'll say, we think
Hmm.
that they be surprised in a surprise me box, which if I was someone ordering, I would always pick surprise me, because the surprise me boxes always get the best flowers, because either you're going to get one of the best recipes that we have available, or every week there are maybe there was an order that was supposed to go for a farm, and the way they blocked it out, they have too many of too many of peonies. We almost never have peonies in our box because they're so expensive, but there may be one week where the farm has an excess of peonies,
Got
and so
it.
we can put them in the box. And so when you do surprise me, you may get something that we're not offering on our recipe menu, because to offer it in our menu as a set item, it's just too expensive to fit within our model, right?
Yeah.
And so those are kind of some of the learnings that we took in, was to figure out how best to service it. And so we ended up being in beta for about 6 weeks, and we made some tweaks, and we continue to tweak, right? Like that's a company. You should be learning from your consumer, really learning how they're using our product. Like when we first started, we were very focused on consumer, and it took us maybe 2 months to realize that there was an opportunity for a B2B play, for a collective play, where we can start to go out to corporates, where we could start focusing on groups like, sororities, Links and Jack and Jill's, and all these different like community organizations. There were ways for us to, kind of start with like enterprise partnerships.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, I do want to ask you though about why you decided to branch out because you've talked about sometimes you felt like there was an oversubscription of customers when you were doing, direct to consumer with the farms. So why then go out and add other streams while you're still developing the company in general?
Well, because to be honest, like if I could break, there's a couple things. One, in the retail space, which is ultimately the way that we start in the consumer space,
Mm.
the margins on consumer products are often far lesser than they are in the B2B space, right? That's first and
Mm.
foremost.
Okay.
Second of all, the cost to acquire a consumer is far more expensive than the cost to acquire a business client. And what I quickly realized is that we did not have the financial infrastructure to support a solely consumer based offering. And so what we realized is that in order for us to truly grow the consumer business in the way that it needed, the attention that it needed, and really the traditional structures that you use to build it, like marketing budgets, advertising budgets, all of these things. You
Mm.
need resources. You either need to raise outside funding, or you need to figure out how to raise enough revenue to support that growth. And because
Right.
it's just expensive, so that's ultimately why we started thinking, where else can we start to get the revenue from in order to grow? And we're at this point kind of doing a mix of both both. We're just recently, getting ready to close out our friends and family round, and we'll be moving into our seed round here shortly. But
Congrats.
we're really focusing. Thank you very much. I'm super excited about the way this company is, like the ways that we're looking at opportunities for growth and collaboration and all those things. But really, to be honest, it was out of necessity, to answer your question plainly. It was just out of necessity for survival, because you could be moving all these boxes, but when you start to look at the numbers, you're like, okay, we're still not really making money, because, when you have the boxes, the flowers you got to pay for, the shipping you have to pay for, there's a loss there. Then you have the added element of, how are we going to get these customers? We've still, to this day, all of our growth has been 100% organic, right? So we do earned media, because being a former publicist, I understand the true value of proper PR and proper media outreach, right? Because that gets you trust. Because when they see you, we've been in Forbes, we've been in Essence, Black Enterprise, GQ, Good Housekeeping, and that's been really what has brought us business. It's because you can buy that kind of trust, but you can buy it when you have the budget for it,
Right.
And we did not have that budget for it, and so I knew very early on that PR was going to be how we were going to be able to sustain at least our consumer business early on. And then now we're using a lot of, earned media as we start to go into the B2B space as well.
So if anyone listening recognizes the value of having all that media coverage, but they don't necessarily have the expertise you do or the connections that you probably have from the PR space, how would you advise them to get that sort of media coverage for their companies? Because I think I've heard you say that a lot of your consumer traffic comes from a lot of the media coverage that you've gotten, and that really is what helped you get started. So how would someone go about doing that if they are kind of starting from the ground up?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have a background in PR at all, I'd say there's a couple of things you can do. One, you could look on like Upwork or Fiverr or somewhere like that, and you can find, within this distributed workforce system that we've kind of gained over the last several years, you could always, try to find someone who could offer those services to you, at a lesser cost. Another thing is there's listservs that's really what they do, is instead of you going out pitching to reporters, it's a listserv where a few different listservs. One is called Haro, Help a Reporter Out. And what they do is it's reporters who are working on stories, and they need subjects. They need people to interview. They need storylines. They need these different things. And so they'll go on to Haro and they'll say, looking for, this type of this person in this industry. If this is you, message us with your information.
Right.
And so that's a very easy way to start. And you can do that yourself. The only thing is you have to be clear about your brand story, clear about your messaging, right? Because it has to be concise. Because if you are, just kind of all over the place and trying to tell your story, you could very easily, you're gonna miss out on a lot of those pitches. So it's just kind of preparing your pitch, which again, if you don't know how to prepare a pitch, but you feel like you could, kind of source stuff through a listserv like Haro, again, you could go to one of these distributed workforce sites and just pay someone for the project of writing a pitch for you that you can then just repurpose over and over and over again. So that's, I think, the best way to start if you don't have it. And then the old faithful way is also people, love to get interns because they're either no cost or low cost. And you get, if you have a college university nearby that, has a communication or PR department, also, getting a PR intern, they may be able to help you with some of that stuff as well.
So when I think about everything you've shared with us today, I'm imagining that it's very difficult and intricate to deliver flowers that are fresh perfectly every single time. So what does the behind the scenes logistics look like, and how long did it take you to stand up a process and a system that you were comfortable with, as far as your processes, the tools you're using, and the team that you've had to put in place?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. And that continues to evolve, quite honestly, right? Because all flowers don't ship equally, right? Like it's funny, I was
Mm.
just having a conversation with someone yesterday who wanted a specialty box and they really wanted like hydrangeas. And I was saying to them, we actually stopped shipping hydrangeas not too long ago. Not to say that we won't get back to it, but hydrangeas are one of those that need a constant water source, or else they fall. They deflate very quickly, almost like a balloon.
Mm.
And you can dunk them and bring them back, but if you don't know how to dunk, you're just going to be sitting there with flowers in water that's not going to work. And I don't. That's not the kind of product that we want to ship out, right? And so
Right.
it's learning which flowers perform really well in shipping, the best way to package them for it. And quite frankly, the early years for us, we didn't have to worry about it at all because all of our boxes were coming straight from the farm.
Mm.
Right? So the farms were professionals at packing because that's all farms do for the most part is they package in boxes safely so that the flowers won't be jostled around too much in transit. And so they kind of mastered that process. But for us, when we started doing some of the fulfillment internally, because we'd have like specialty items and things like that,
Mm.
that's when we actually created a custom box that was specifically created specifically to, kind of hold the flowers into place and make sure that transit for the flowers is really safe. So with that, it helps to minimize any negative impact on the flowers during the shipping process. And then the way that we, kind of the design on our boxes, it, tells them right away when they open the box, like, hey, these flowers have been, traveling to you for, a good 24 hours, like any house guest that you have. The first thing you want to do after a long journey is offer them something to drink. You want to get them in water right away because by the time you get them, we always ship our flowers overnight, right? So by the time they arrive to their flower foster parent, they're going to need water because they've been off of their life source for at least 24 hours, and so
Mm.
they'll come in the box and they'll seem a little bit limp, but as soon as you put them in water, give them a couple of hours to hydrate, they will come right back to life.
Good to go.
And then we have instructions for how to kind of arrange and care for them from there. But really it's for us, again, it was easy because the farms were doing the shipping, and then once we started doing it ourselves, we used the learnings that we had from when our farm was shipping, but then also used the learnings from when we were shipping some things ourselves and put that into a carefully constructed box that could
Mm.
help us
So,
make sure.
did you have to hire on a fulfillment staff and get into a fulfillment website, a fulfillment site or a warehouse? What did you have to do?
Yeah, so not necessarily. We're doing some of that at the end of this quarter. Actually, that's on our track for us to bring in and start kind of looking at other fulfillment options.
Hmm.
But our relationships with our farms are still really strong, and so they do a lot of the bulk of the fulfillment for us, and they
Oh.
use our boxes and ship it out. We only do a small amount of fulfillment in-house, and again, those are just for things that require a more soft touch, or they, some extra element. We have some, corporate clients that require additional items to go in there, just additional extra touches. And so we'll fulfill them internally. And luckily for us right now, that is manageable for us. But we expect that going into the second quarter of this year, that will become unmanageable. And so that's why we said we're going to be bringing in specifically someone to manage not just the overall floral operations, but distribution and fulfillment, so that we could kind of begin to adjust that process, because that's really the phase that we're in. I always say, I think we're going into our third year. The first year for us was really proving the concept, figuring out kind of where we fit in the marketplace, how are our customers using us, and how we, what's our full revenue model. The
Hmm.
second, year for us was all about, laying a strong foundation so that all elements of our revenue model could be fully maximized, right? Like getting our trademarks, getting our minority business certification, those kind of things.
Hmm.
And then going into this third year, it's really about revenue. It's about building on, really really experiencing the fruit of all the kind of early foundational work that we've been doing. And so that's why I say, this is the time that we're now starting to, kind of formulate new plans for fulfillment, because we expect a significant amount of growth.
That's amazing to see that you have put in the work and laid the right foundation to experience this growth. But you have talked about going in for funding. So everything you've described seems manageable as far as your startup capital that you need. But could you give us some perspective on how much startup capital you needed and how much you think you're going to need to raise in order to grow the company to where you want it to be?
Yeah, so that is a good question. I've actually spent a considerable amount of time thinking about this, right? Because even though there's been all of these new VCs that pop up that are specially focused on Black founders, even Black women founders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still find the raise process to be a bit unnerving in a way, right? I initially was looking to raise, had done I initially kicked off a raise for the company in the fall of 2021. And I, took some VC meetings. And if I'm being honest, I just didn't really like the way that it felt. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to, take a little time to really think through what I want this to be. How much do I actually need? What do I actually need to grow the company? Can I grow the company without outside funding? I did a lot of self-funding early on, had some early unexpected investments. Just, a friend was just like, hey, I see where you're going with this. I love the concept. I'm just going to give you some money. Give me whatever you want. I just want to see this grow because I know you could do it. And then
Nice.
that was the first thing and that was after like a month and a half of the company being up. She just saw the vision and she gave us a good, a nice little chunk of change that we were able to stretch out and use for a while. And then, luckily I had a good amount of savings and I was able to put some money into it. And that kind of gave us the time that we needed for me to really consider what our next steps were. And so it wasn't until late last year that I, really launched a formal seed round of funding, which for me was just a couple of $100,000 that we would need to kind of put, all of the other pieces that we're talking about in place, hire, a COO who could, start to manage a lot of the operations and put the sales team in place and, all of these different like additional components to really elevate us from, I don't want to say that we were a mom and pop business, but it was very much a small startup. And nobody, well, at least I don't want to stay a small business, right? Like I'm trying to be a small business turns medium, turns big, turns unicorn, right? Like that's the space that I'm going on. And so what I did was I said, okay, what do I feel like is our quickest pathway to profitability? And I mentioned earlier, I feel like that's B2B. And as I mentioned, the B2B, cost to acquire customers is quite a bit less. Instead of focusing on needing, massive budgets for marketing and advertising. Instead, I just need a sales team. And that sales team will start to get us the B2B clients that we need, and then the revenue required to then build the other elements of the business. And so it took some time for me to kind of think about the best way for me to go about that. And so what we're doing now is raising a seed round of funding as a safe. And then we're going to use that money to get to a significant amount of profitability and revenue with our B2B clients. And then once we get to a place where we're comfortable, we're building out our advisory board and really putting the things in place so that when we do go out on our first priced round, that we will have so much revenue that it will be undeniable that the money that we're requesting is the money that is required, and that it will be something that we will be far more in charge of, because again, the revenue will speak for itself. And so that's kind of the strategy that we're first raising this first, kind of smaller safe. And then, I'm thinking within the next, 18 months or so, we'll have, the large revenue that we need to then go out on an actual priced round to be able to get the amount of funding that we deserve and will need for what will be, our next phase of growth.
Oh, I love to see how you're approaching this process because it can be daunting. And I think when people come in unprepared, they don't see the results they need and they just have to go back to the drawing board. So I love your approach. But as someone running a wellness company, I feel like you're probably uniquely qualified to answer this question. How are you taking care of yourself as a founder? Simply because you are running two businesses that are growing at a rapid rate. So what are you doing to make sure that, number one, you're not burning yourself out, and number two, you continue to thrive as a business owner?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I still go to the flowers. They still bring me peace. And I
Mm,
actually am really enjoying building this company. And while there are things of the business that can be stressful, I get to still play with the flowers all day. So it's immediate balance for me. But then also, I just returned at the top of the year. I was offline for about 2 weeks at a silent meditation retreat. And it was magical. It just was time for me to completely unplug. There, no devices, no phones, no laptops, no nothing but silence. They call it noble silence. No
mm,
communication of any kind, just, meditation and, quiet time with yourself. And that was so incredibly refreshing. Just the way that it recharged me and got me, focused on really what this next quarter, next year, next journey for us is going to look like. And so it's this thing of prioritizing your self-care and prioritizing taking the time. I'm not suggesting everyone take, 2 weeks to do that, but that's something that I desperately needed. Just because of all of the working that I've done in all my years, I've never taken that much time and desperately needed it. So for me, it's the flowers, yes, but then also being really intentional about setting boundaries, not just with other people for my time, but with myself for my time, right? Not carrying my laptop upstairs into the bedroom, not
mm.
working all the way up till the last thing I do before I go to bed is shut the laptop. Instead, give myself time in the morning to wake up, experience life, whatever the day is going to bring me, go for my workout, do those things. And then on the other side of the day, also since I came back from the retreat, also enacting siesta right smack in the middle of the day, even if I don't go to sleep, but just giving myself 45 minutes to an hour to just sit still. And then
Mm.
at the end of the day, saying, okay, well, if I know I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock, by 7:30, I'm starting to wind down. I'm going to pour a cup of tea. I close the laptop and give myself that time to unwind. And it's just really being intentional about those boundaries again, not just for other people, but more importantly for myself, so that I could always make sure that I'm giving myself time to feel what I'm feeling rather than essentially bury it in the work. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I think sometimes driven people tend to do that. You don't really feel everything that's going on in the moment because you're working up until the
Exactly.
last second, like you said. So, Talia, hearing your story, you are building something amazing. You're building something groundbreaking. So, for anyone who wants to support, get into DIY flower arranging, where can we find you? Where can we follow your journey?
Please, you can follow us on Postal Petals across all platforms. We're postalpetals.com to order a box or book a workshop. Again, we do both consumer boxes. We also do corporate events and gifting. And you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. Again, we're Postal Petals all the way across social media platforms.
If you enjoyed this episode with Talia and want to listen on the go, don't forget that this podcast also has an audio version that you can listen to on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else audio episodes are available. Before you head out, if this episode was helpful to you, don't forget to share it with someone else who could use it. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode. Bye.